you might have a PhD in biology, but you never learned how to teach biology. So that's really where Quality Matters comes and looks at how do you engage students in this new modality so the students are not going, where is this? What do I need to do next? Or what is it I'm supposed to learn?
What if we sent something out, giant foam finger and some popcorn and a link to watch the football game?
It really does open that up for learning when they want to learn and allows them to have that flexibility. What does that mean to me if I'm an online student? Just know how to teach biology from how your professor taught you biology, which might not be the right way.
Good morning. Welcome to Direct Edge, where we explore the strategic thinking behind sustainable business growth. I'm your host, Wilson Zair, founder of Zairmail, Sendex, and a bunch of others. Today I'm spending time with James Snyder, Director of Marketing and Community Engagement for Quality Matters. And are you in Portland, Oregon still?
I am still in Portland, Oregon. Same house as I've been for almost 30 years now, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've known you all of those years too. But anyway, Jim's an expert on both the educational marketplace, nonprofits, and marketing, and really we just want to spend a little bit more time to learn more about all of that and see what Jim has to share with us, so that we can all take advantage of his wisdom and grow our organizations as well. So let's get started. Without any further ado, Jim, tell us about what you do and how you found your way there.
Thank you, Wilson. Yeah. Back in 1999, 2000, and 2001. And so started before I was a undergrad math and physics major, and then was a physics major I got a master's in physics, and then got my MBA, and moved to Finland for a year and worked for Nokia mobile phones, and then came back and was doing a lot of electronic data interchange and was really trying to break into marketing because what I saw was going on at Nokia during those go-go 90s. And so landed at Zairmail after a short stint at Pacific Core is where I was before I started at Zairmail.
Right.
But then was at Zairmail for a number of years, and then after that really sort of found my love of education and went back and earned my doctorate of ed and worked for NWEA in their marketing, and they didn't call it sales, they called it client enrollment because it was a nonprofit organization, and was there for a number of years, did some international work, working both in Central and Eastern Europe as well as Asia, helping to grow out a lot of the English-speaking K-12 schools, American schools, embassy schools. They were using our assessment data, and so had to find different ways to reach them and how to attract them to use our assessment tests there. Then went to a language assessment test that was based down in Eugene, where same idea, did marketing and sales for that organization on how well students were reading, writing, listening, and speaking in 12 different languages. And then we sold some language assessments to the military in a bunch of different areas. And then from there went to the organization I've been to now, which is called Quality Matters, and we do really quality assurance for online learning in the higher ed space as well as the K-12 space. So we work with a bunch of institutes of higher ed on the quality of their online courses, their online programs, provide professional development to those same institutions, as well as we'll actually go in and certify the quality of the organization's online courses and their online programs. And so my day job is really to grow that business, and then also for the institutions that are already using our products, get them to use more. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're a nonprofit, so it's very mission driven, but we still got to keep the lights on and grow the business. But we do like to think at the end of the day, it's really about the students and student learning and maximizing their learning. And being able to equip the professors and the instructional designers, the ones who build courses, with the ability to do their jobs and allow them to focus on student learning and not worry about having students ask questions like, is this going to be on the exam? Or what do I do next as they work their way through a online or blended course? Or now for that matter, since the pandemic, lots of courses are already built into a learning management system. So except for the fact that the professor is standing up in front of a class talking, students are doing all their assignments, they're gathering all their materials through that learning management system. So it's a de facto, you need to really understand how you build that part of the course to make it be of high quality so that students are engaged and stay within the course. So that's sort of my background. I don't know where else we can go, but
Yeah, that sounds great. I think the recording maybe broke up a little bit at the beginning. So just to be clear, you worked at Zairmail.
yes.
Zairmail was we still have a Zairmail today, but that was the Zairmail 1.0, and it was jointly funded by Hewlett Packard and Draper Fisher Jurvetson. DFJ is kind of tier one California VC. They funded like Hotmail and Skype and a bunch of other interesting things. And we started pre-bubble on the internet, and Jim did the marketing there, so did an excellent job of that. And then we talked about NWEA. I know we both know what that is, but the audience may not. NWEA, I think, stands for Northwest Education Association. It was a large nonprofit here in the Portland area. Maybe 100 million plus in terms of actual, money raised on an annual basis. We're not allowed to say sales, I think.
I think they could call it sales now, but back then, yeah, it was in about 1,000 school districts, and by the time I left, they were in about 5,000 school districts throughout the United States. I was there for about eight or 9 years, and they sell basically the interim assessment test. So not the high stakes at the end of the year type assessment test that you do, and not the quick quizzes that a teacher would do, but these assessments that they could provide a couple of times a year to really get a snapshot. They were on the computer. They basically were called computerized adaptive tests. So kind of like the GMAT. If you get the questions right, the questions get harder and harder. If you get the questions wrong, they get easier and easier till you find out where the learner is.
Yeah, we had a common friend who worked there, Jeff Strickler, who was the CEO for years and a finance guy, I think, for a while. Jeff and I knew each other from another technology company here in Portland called Cadre Technologies. He was the chief legal officer there, so that's how our paths finally first crossed. And he explained to me long ago how Northwest Education Association, NWEA, started as kind of a family venture or a small scale venture, and they started out as helping school districts do assessment. And as you mentioned, it was this key adaptive testing. So it was not everybody didn't get the same test. Students would start out and if they were doing well, then it got progressively harder. If not, they eased up so they could kind of measure each student with where they were at, which is unique technology at the time. And then he told me with No Child Left Behind, I think that was a Bush era kind of program. He said it just blew up and the whole thing just exploded. Every school district had to have that because they really, their students had to pass this end of year test in order to get their funding.
And these interim tests really worked as a predictive measure so the beauty was that they had these research company as well. So they could know if you took this interim test and you took it in October, they had a really good idea what type of instruction you needed to get to be able to pass the end of state, the end of year state level test, which was being mandated by the No Child Left Behind test. So that was really what helped drive the sales of the adoption. How about we call it adoption of the product?
Yeah, it was really interesting to me at the time because, it was I spent most of my career in the technology industry. It was a technology product being offered by a nonprofit, but the revenues were, or adoption were much greater than most technology companies. I just thought it was really interesting. But they had to do all the same kinds of things except that, when you sell to a school district, it's kind of a, it's an enterprise sale, but a multi-stage enterprise sale that involves a lot of different people. So it's a complex sale, organizational sale. Um, but it was really interesting because even though it was a nonprofit, it felt a lot like a for-profit enterprise in terms of customer acquisition. Um, so that was fun, and you spent a lot of time there helping them be successful, and then got your degree and your PhD. Um, which I have too. I mean, when I'm not running technology business, I teach at the university level, and that's kind of that's house stakes. That's what it takes to get in the game. And not always, because online today, people they need a lot more people, and so every once in a while, people they'll compromise based on industry experience, what have you, but really, I mean, you still want a PhD to be teaching undergraduate students or certainly graduate students. Um, and you've continued in the nonprofit world. I think that's interesting, and it's also interesting this idea of online education. Um, for most recently, and I've taught over the years. I've taught a lot of different universities. I've taught at Oregon State, Portland State, Concordia, Melhurst University. Um, yeah, no, exactly. It wasn't my fault.
No, no. Yeah.
I did my best.
Yeah.
And Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok.
Oh, nice.
And most recently was Lewis and Clark University, but I taught for many years at Eastern Oregon University, which is a small rural university in La Grande, Oregon. Eastern Oregon is about as far
Yeah.
east in Oregon you
Yeah.
can get until you run into Idaho. And the Idaho's a different world. We know that. Of course, I'm going to get mail from our Idaho listeners, but
Different politics. Yeah.
but it's all good. We're all trying to educate the next generation of leaders. Um, and the funny thing about Eastern Oregon University was, because I came there to teach like a regular professor, like traditionally you would teach, toe to toe with students in a classroom. And it turns out that because it's Eastern Oregon University is in rural Eastern Oregon, they were very early into distance learning. And, even pre-internet, they would have these terminals where, people could use satellite to beam into the classroom, and they would send out even, VHS recordings and all kinds of things to do this, distance learning, because most people weren't near a campus. So when the internet showed up, they were early to grab onto that. So even when I showed up there in 2015, over half of the students were online students um, it never showed up on campus, would never set foot on a campus, even when they graduated a state university. Um, it did have a beautiful campus and sports programs and stuff. So for the students who did show up and went to school in person, there was football and baseball and plenty of
Yeah.
on-campus
All the
stuff.
all the culture of what you get being a college student. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something like 35% of the on-campus students were student athletes. They so that part was kind of normal, but this online part, I don't want to say normal, but it was familiar to me. Um, but this online part was something new. So I started doing online courses for them. And I think I did, I don't know, at least one new prep every term I was there, and ended up building out these online courses, best practices, and did videos for the university on best practices for online learning and what it takes for student engagement. And it turns out you can do a lot of really powerful things with learning management systems and online engagement, even for on-campus students. So it turned out that, this is how this evolved over time. As all my classes, I taught the same classes. Every class I taught online and on campus,
Yeah.
not just one in one modality. It's
Yeah.
an academic term.
That's a good, yeah, that is a good academic term. Yeah.
Um, and at some point, I just started blending them. So we'd start out the week, with an announcement. The assignments were all online. The grading was online. So it freed up more classroom time for discussions and guests and knowledge sharing, and students always knew exactly where their grade was because it's all in the electronic grade book. And it just turned out that the entire educational experience got better for everybody when you started blending all of that together. Um, but I will tell you from my more recent educational experience, not everybody does that. And in fact, a lot of it, my son actually went to college at the same time I was teaching. And so I got to see behind the scenes and some of the stuff he was receiving. And I have to tell you, some of it was, man, I don't know, it was ancient. I mean, like that it hadn't been updated in 25 years. The same textbook, same curriculum. They weren't learning using the online learning management system. And so his experience for some of his classes was very good. For other classes was really not very good. And I don't want to pick on anyone, so I won't single out classes, but I'm thinking both as as an educator, but also as an employer, looking at what he's taking away from those classes. Like as an accounting class, I'm thinking, there's no way you're going to know anything about accounting from what I'm saying here.
Yeah. And
And but I'm
yeah.
but
That,
I'm expecting you to show up and
yeah.
being able to talk
Have that
about
knowledge and jump
accounting
in. Yeah.
stuff. Um, so I think this topic is more important than most people realize. It's not just some niche, or fringe topic. It's something that should cut across the entire spectrum of education. And I think that's where, if I understand right, that's where Quality Matters comes in. They say, hey, this is important. We're going to try and enrich this experience, make sure every student gets a rewarding experience that's going to help, further their education. And I
Yeah. I
do,
mean, yeah, that's really where, Quality Matters looks at it as the professor, the instructor, they have all this high end knowledge around the subject matter that they are teaching. And traditionally, they know how to stand up and deliver that content in front of a class. But now, with this new technology and the learning management system, whether you're doing it online or still doing it in face to face, the different modalities don't matter as much as being able to provide that same look and feel across different courses. So if you're at the same institution and one course is designed one way and another course is designed a different way, the students get confused on where they're supposed to go, how they're supposed to navigate through the system. So that's really where Quality Matters comes and looks at how do you engage students in this new modality, some of the things that you were talking about before of how do you get them to be excited, and then how do you help them work through all the courses so the students are not going, where is this? What do I need to do next? Or what is it I'm supposed to learn? Is this going to be on the test? And really, if you have all the learning objectives listed out at the beginning, this is what you're going to do. I mean, it's the same as when you're trying to sell somebody something or market to somebody. What's the problem that you're trying to solve for them? And I think a lot of times professors are sort of like, oh, I'm just going to tell them the things, and then they're coming at it from like, what do the students need to know, and what will they know when they leave my course? That becomes a lot more powerful for both the educator and the students.
I know, I think you're right. And I think there's a lot of potential. I mean, we talked about this briefly before, but a lot of additional potential too. One of the things we know in technology is when we're doing technology marketing in particular, a lot of times in marketing, we're figuring out what's next in terms of the product line and what the product, you know, and engineering tells us how to build it, but we figure out what the market demand looks like, what the opportunities are, and spec it out. But one of the things I know from doing market research is often it's hard to ask people what they need because, one is they're oftentimes they're comfortable with what they have, so they don't really want change, but oftentimes they don't know what's possible. If we understand the technology, we know what we can accomplish, but the average person you talk to, they have no idea where that's going. And so if you look at an environment like this that's changing, and it's not, online learning is certainly changing. It's not new anymore. I mean, it's mainstream. Even high school kids, because of COVID, a lot of students completed their entire high school education online. Um, But on-campus learning is really, I mean, we have a faculty that some are more educated than others on what's possible, what these tools are available, what they do. They they really see themselves as being a source of knowledge, which they are, but it's how you communicate that knowledge makes a difference. And and a lot of those folks are not, they may not be comfortable with the technology, may not know it exists. Maybe they're just, trying to write out the course to the gold watch, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to throw stones, but it the kinds of technologies that exist today have the potential, or more than have the potential, have the, you know, can enrich the learning experience for even on-campus students. And there's some consistency, as you say, but there's things that go beyond that. So I know when I was doing courses, I would do stuff like you start out the week with a weekly email message. Here's what we're doing this week. Please go to Learning Management System. You'll find a copy of the lecture, the copy of the quiz we might have this week. Here's what it looks like. And then we meet in person and we'll do that. We'll talk about the materials in class and answer questions. Hopefully people have read the book. The quizzes, we can do those online, because that frees up class time. It used to be I'd have to give a quiz in class. Then we'd set aside time in class to review the results. And then, but I get those class sessions back, or the students get the class sessions back. We can pull in current events, stuff that are online, stuff that are relevant to students to help engage them. And we can do that whether they're on campus or online. And so it's a huge benefit if people are willing to embrace it and take advantage of it. And that takes the students too, but most students these days are pretty tech savvy. I know at home if I have a problem with the TV, I don't even try to address it. I just call my son.
It's all the young ones that know that technology. Yeah, and that's what we say. I mean, if you're taking classes on at campus, you're online. You bring your computer to the class, and you're doing the work that way. So there's a lot of skill to be had, and to be able to engage the learners not only during class time. And I think that's what really opens up the power of being able to connect with learners almost 24/7. And that's because you can push content out to them. Here's additional readings you can do. Here's some assessments you can provide to them. Here's discussions they can be having. So it really does open that up for learning when they want to learn, and allows them to have that flexibility. We do a yearly research report of the chief online learning officers of universities, and sort of look at where are they going. And really that's where we're seeing online headed, is more and more students are taking they like to be able to take classes online and also face to face. So they like that blended approach to be able to do that. But you want to still be able to provide them with the products that they see. If they like what they like from the online world, they want some of that to sort of flow over into their face-to-face learning.
Well, even at Eastern Oregon, I mentioned there's like student athletes, so a very large percentage of on-campus students are student athletes, but a large percentage of those students do online courses too, because imagine you're traveling, you're
Balance the
taking
time, yeah.
being able to do online courses for the ones that make sense, give you control over your schedule, be able to maximize your on-campus time is important for those students too. And we did have this. I've had this discussion with the university that, I'd never embraced this concept, but the idea is that there is a problem in the educational environment where you have traditional on-campus students that build a relationship with the university from that on-campus experience, that shared experience. And so years down the road, when you're talking about, alumni donations and community support and stuff, that relationship turns out to be very important. But a lot of on-camp online students never have an opportunity to develop that. They just take the courses. And we could talk about demographics. The demographics are different between these populations. And I did a very detailed study on this at one time that I'd be happy to share the results with anybody who's interested. But it's, the online students are pretty much focused on getting through the program, and they're going to get, and they do shop. They're going to find the best value for their money. But we don't experience the same kind of alumni connection. And so how do you do that? And so I always thought about this idea of creating an online campus where we, for example, if you have a football game and the football games are on Saturday, it's a big deal in the community. What if we sent something out to, send out a package on the week before and send out to each of the online students, send them a giant foam finger and some popcorn and a link to watch the football game. They could be involved in crafts, general education. We talked about this idea of maybe doing a cooking class, and you could stream cooking classes right from a kitchen in Bangkok or from, do Moroccan food from somewhere in Morocco, and you could really turn it into a global undertaking. You want to do, study biology. You can go to some other part of the world and see things close up with. And so there's really a way to not only enrich the entire learning experience, but to build this engagement with the students, a lasting engagement. And I don't know, I haven't really seen anybody do it to that extent yet. Maybe you have. I mean, you see a lot more people.
Yeah, I mean, some of the K-12 online learners, like trying to get them involved with like a virtual prom or things like that, where you're trying to still build that culture of this is the institution that I'm attending. What does that mean to me if I'm an online student? And it becomes hard because you're faced behind a screen. You're some of the time, like a lot of asynchronous courses, you're not really like, how do you build that engagement? So Quality Matters does have a couple of courses that we talk about. How do you build that with video or other ways to help bring that engagement, to get students to understand that you care? Because otherwise you're just this nameless, faceless professor that is dispensing all of this content. But if you're not actively engaging the students, that you're losing some of the connection that you potentially could have had if you're on a online, if you're on a face-to-face campus where they're interacting, you're having lunch with them or things like that. There are other ways that you can do that through video and the things that you were talking about, where you're streaming some things and having some of those things do on the event with the institutions that have a bunch of military. So they're on a base in Germany, and so how do you integrate those time frames differently, the West Coast of the United States with Germany? And so how are you engaging those students in real time? Sometimes you can't, so you just have to sort of like, what are other ways to do that?
Yeah, I was teaching an MBA program one time where we streamed to, it's an executive MBA program. So we streamed to these executives all over. It was a, top 25 program. So we had, all kinds of interesting people. And there was one guy in Afghanistan, in a, I don't want to say a tent, but, a tent-like structure. And, and he had all kinds of the interesting lessons he would bring from from his engagement in that country. And of course it was military in nature, but it all was relevant, seemed to be relevant to what we were talking about, aerospace engineers and executives from other industries. It was really interesting. But the other thing I know, especially with, new college learners, is that there's, building a relationship is very important. I mean, in the old days, students show up, professor would start talking, they would take notes, and, they'd do their best to pass the class, and so professor was a broadcaster, the student was supposed to be the,
The
sponge
sage on the stage, just dispensing knowledge. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But students these days aren't, cut from that same cloth. they really want to have, they want to know that their professor is an expert. They want to have an engagement. They want the professor to see them as people, as individuals. Um, most of my students, I know where they came from. I know what sports they play, and I know the things they like and don't like. Probably not at the depth I would want to, but we know each other. Um, and once you build a relationship, then they're open to hearing what you have to say, and so you can build that rapport is really important. And that rapport is going to be important whether you're on campus or online. And if you're online, especially if you're asynchronous, the question becomes, how do you do that? I mean, how do you build that kind of relationship? And in order to have meaningful education, it needs to happen, especially with younger learners. Um, and so I guess that's the kind of thing you're assessing and helping people get their arms around.
Yeah. Yeah, we do a lot with that. I mean, if you think of high school teachers, they learn a lot about the theory of teaching, the pedagogy, how do you scaffold your learning, and a lot of times in higher ed, um, you're being plucked out. You might have a PhD in biology, but you never learned how to teach biology. You just know how
Good
to teach
point. Yeah.
biology from how your professor taught you biology, which might not be the right way. So part of the courses that we offer really dive into some of that teaching theory and practice that you might not have had before. And then how does it pertain to delivering instruction online? Because that's even a different creature than delivering instruction in a face-to-face environment. So that's
Ooh.
some of the courses that the short 2 week, 1 week long courses that are also delivered asynchronously. So you're sort of drinking your own champagne or eating your own dog food, as they would say in the of you're a student in a course learning online about how to deliver instruction or engage your students online. Well, you're doing it in the environment that you have to. So the facilitator that's doing it is sort of modeling that. And lots of times some of these professors haven't had online courses before, and so they're figuring out how to get through the learning management system and log on and be like, oh, when is this course due and what am I supposed to? And I always say, like, sometimes the professors are the worst customers because they're also waiting for the last minute to turn their work in. Even though they get mad when the students are doing that, they're mirroring that same rational behavior of, oh, I don't have to get it done till Tuesday at midnight. I'm starting at 9 o'clock that night. And that's, we try and stress not to do that. But, and how do you do that? By creating some deliverables along the way. So you can't hold up the 2 week long course and try and slam it through in the last 2 hours. So, but that's part of the beauty of how do you model what you're looking to deliver. And that's kind of what we try and do. Yeah.
No, I totally get it. I mean, I remember the first time I taught a whole class on my own, without, just building from scratch. And I had a, degree in, I don't know, system science, finance and system science. And somebody says, okay, here you go. And it's like, oh, what do I know about teaching?
Yeah,
I know a lot
know that.
about
I
system
know it. Yeah,
science
yeah.
or physics or whatever the
Yeah.
topic is, and a lot of people just do it's on the job experience, but this is all new technology, and most people, I would say most the faculty I know have never taken an online class. They didn't, their program wasn't that way, and most PhD programs still aren't. Yeah, so that turns out to be pretty important. So let's talk about. I mean, we could talk a lot about all of this stuff. It's a great topic area. It's still. I mean, I've spent most of my career working on what I would call convergence. So, um, fortunately or unfortunately, I started out as a software engineer and transitioned like you did. I went and got my MBA and went back into marketing and business development, strategic alliances, business development, executive leadership. But I did that at a time when the internet was first showed up, and I guess it would be incorrect to say the internet because the internet would have been around even then, been around 50 years or so. But the World Wide Web, as that went crazy around year 2000. Um, So there's just all this legacy technology out there, systems that people use, and then this new digital world. And how do you stitch that together? Um, and so we worked on voice over IP. A lot of our technologies are still in things like Skype and tools like that. Zairmail, and of course, use the first one, Fusion, was integrating the public telephone network with digital voice. And then when Zairmail is really the postal system and digital technologies. And here, I mean, we've got another example of that. Uber is, the taxi industry online. And
That's right. Instead of driving your friend, you're driving someone else. Yeah.
well, yeah, it's even more than that because it's a platform business. And really what you're doing is connecting riders with people who have rides, and technology allows you to do. These are resources that you could never monetize before because you didn't have access. And then in education, of course, here is another example of this legacy industry where we have all of this cool new technology that could make the world different. But we also have some built-in barriers to that, like things like tenure and stuff that make it so that as an organization, we can't force people to adopt the new technologies. We can hope that they're conscientious enough to want to do that. But not everybody chooses to. Different people have different interests and different ideas about what that should look like. Um,
Well, I even remember. Part of this is all about. To tie this back to marketing, and is around education. When I was at Zairmail, one of the things that we partnered with the United States Postal Service, because obviously people know how to send mail, but really understanding the power of direct mail for small businesses and the way that Zairmail would overlaid the whole technology engine on how to do. So instead of me going to a print shop and saying, "Hey, I'd like to do some sort of direct mail," you Zairmail created that platform online so that you could upload content or get content ideas and do that. But we would go to different cities and put on a half day workshop on what does direct mail mean. And it was sort of like for some of these small businesses who they're like, okay, I kind of understand direct mail, but that was the whole value of how do you get them engaged and understand the value proposition and what's the ROI of working through that. And then the Zairmail benefit was you could just go online and do that instead of having to, make phone calls and hire other people to put the content together, because you could just do it yourself and upload it.
and yeah, no, I think you're right about that, but I think it maybe even goes a step further than that. I mean, I shared a story at times of my friend who was a vice president of marketing at the U.S. Postal Service, and we did this, early days. We did this all in partnership with the U.S. Postal Service because they were looking for, how do I bridge this gap, and we called it hybrid mail. But um, I'll call him Marty. Marty had this. He said, his dad owned this little hardware store in Virginia, and dad, some seasons look for ways to, to look for ways to grow his business and survive. And Marty always told him, his dad, you should use direct mail. I work at the postal service. It would be good for your business. It'd be good for me. you should Yeah, you should really think about that. And so after telling his dad this for years, finally one morning, his dad got up and said, "You know what? Maybe Marty's right. I guess I should give this a try." So he grabbed all his stuff and went down to the retail post office and said, "I want to do some direct mail. What do you got for me?" And the guy just looked at him and kind of, turned his head a little bit like, "What?" And that's the dilemma, So on average, we say that, that mail returns $13 for every dollar invested. That's kind of a broad average for a well thought out campaign. But for most, especially most small to medium businesses, they have no idea how to get started, how to get involved. They know what a letter looks like and how to put a stamp on it and how to put that in the mailbox. But if you're doing thousands of letters, that doesn't really work. Yeah. I remember another story. Um, my older stepson, his dad owned a golf promotion company, and he'd do these mailing to advertisers. And they'd do, a couple thousand pieces. And I come home one day, and he's Adams. He's stuffing envelopes on the table, putting stamps on them. I said, putting labels. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Yeah, I'm doing this mailing for Dad." I said, Zairmail would do that in about 30 seconds. And it would cost less too. Why wouldn't he? He says, "Dad doesn't like Zairmail." I said, well, I'm sure that doesn't have anything to do with me. but, but we got him turned around too. but for small business, I mean, you know, mail does some things that no other medium does in terms of reach, in terms of targeting, in terms of response rates, but it has to be well thought out. But that was always not obtainable for the small to medium business. And so Zairmail really democratized that. It gave them ability to connect and take advantage of it and perform better. I mean, to launch a campaign in 30 seconds for delivery in 3 days nationwide at a fraction of the cost. I mean, so that was a really good.
A lot of evangelical work that you have to do to get that message out there, and then get people to do it, which is great.
Right. And you're right. I mean, we did these seminars around the country. I mean, I think we were in over 100 cities, where we'd get together with other folks and teach small businesses how to do this. It turns out that to make our business successful, we have to, we've done work for a lot of larger mailers, and that turns out to be important to keep the lights on. But we've helped out thousands of smaller businesses too. But we also have to worry about customer acquisition, and so does Quality Matters, I'm sure. So how do you go about doing that? How do you go about growing your business and acquiring customers and making all that work?
Yeah, I mean, from one example, I mean, from one area, I mean, we have an addressable market. I mean, there's only 4,500 institutes of higher ed in the United States, and then a number of international ones. So from that standpoint, if our market is that, I mean, we always try and grow the market. We've branched into K-12, and we're headed into sort of corporate training. A lot of higher, large corporations, they push out trainings to their faculty, to their employees via online courses too. You have to, take a course on sexual harassment or things like that, and it's delivered online. So there are ways you can look at the quality of that as well. But our bread and butter has been higher ed, and so it's really been looking at who's the target market, who's the audience that's going to do the buying. And I learned this at NWEA too. There are a lot of people that can say no within the organization. All the IT people, when you're selling a piece of, it's a piece of software that it doesn't really have to, ours is on the cloud, so it doesn't have to be installed anywhere, but still the IT people have to be like, "Oh, it's a website you're visiting? No, you can't go there." And they can't really say yes, but they can say no. So we have to work to overcome those objections, and then we have to find the right person, who is usually the director of online learning or a provost who is doing it from that side, or sometimes we get it from the bottom up, which is the instructional designer, who's the person that sits with a professor, who the professor is told, "Hey, guess what? You're teaching an online course next semester." And then that professor shows up and is like, "Well, here's the PowerPoint slides that I've done before. So what do I do?" And so we get those people. So it's a lot of word of mouth. We do a lot of emailing out to people. We do conferences and try and do that. So those are our areas, but it's really looking at trying to figure out what our ideal customer looks like, and then how do we target and reach them at the point where they are ready to look at quality. Because ours is, we try and turn it from a nice to have to we need to have this, because they're creating online courses, but then it's sort of like, okay, why use Quality Matters as a way to help make our courses better? If there's a cost for that, how do we justify that cost?
And who do you sell to? Do you sell to the organization or the individual faculty members?
It's the most all of our individual professors and people can buy an individual license or a membership. We call it a membership because we're a nonprofit. But for the most part, it's we do it at the institution level. So an institution is purchasing a membership with Into Quality Matters, which gets them access to discounts on our professional development. It gets them access to discounts on our certifications of the courses. So that's the other part that and it gets access to all of the standards that make you know what a high quality online course is. There's 44 different sort of points that we call them specific review standards that you look at, from the course introduction to the assessment to the learning objectives to the accessibility. Accessibility is a big one now for, how accommodations for, do all your videos have closed captioning and the like. So that's what you're purchasing access to, but it's mostly at the institution level. So a large institution like Ohio State or Oregon State. Oregon State's a good example. They have a whole online e-campus program, and so they utilize our standards for figuring out the quality of their online courses that they do.
Hmm. Now, so if the institution buys the service, Quality Matters, how do they make faculty use it?
Well, that's there's the carrot and the stick, just like everything else that you could do. So, and we find that interesting because some institutions are union shops, so that's negotiated through the faculty of. There's a whole implementation plan that you can roll out around. I mean, you have to make them understand what's the value for why would faculty want to do it. And so the way that we can sell that is high quality online courses. The research demonstrates students are more engaged. They ask higher level questions. They don't ask questions like, where is this going to be? But they actually interact with the content. So if you're a professor, don't you want your students interacting with the content and show, wanting to show up to class and continue to, for especially at community colleges, that drop off rate is one of the things that the institutions measure against and have to go against accreditation, is what are the completion rates of students. And so our research demonstrates that high quality online courses have better student engagement, better student retention. So there's that side of it. Then if you get the right leadership, they can sometimes say, we're using it. So that's and you have to use it. If you want to teach an online course, it's got to go through a Quality Matters review internally. Someone has to okay, you have to follow these guidelines. You have to maybe take one of our courses to get to demonstrate that you understand that power. So, there's both sides of it that can go where to get that adoption. So once it's implemented, and I always find it's good to find a few people who are super excited about it, and then they tell everybody else, so you don't get that person who's just waiting for the gold watch and is like, yeah, I'll just wait you out until until I retire, because that person, you can't get them to be one of the early adopters. But people who love technology and understand, oh, if I do this, I get better student engagement, they're the ones that get buy-in. And then sometimes people are like, oh, how come Fred's doing so well over here? I need to learn how to do that. So that we see that a lot with when some of our faculty, the same way that you taught in 7 or 8 different institutions, other professors do the same thing. So ones who leave with the passion to deliver instruction online, go from one institution to another, or they bring Quality Matters with them. So that's another way that we get that, through that word of mouth, that, if I come here and teach, I need to make sure that we can use Quality Matters.
Yeah, I know that there's in the university environment especially, there's a real tension between faculty and administration.
All academic freedom and yeah,
because
who you tell me what to do. Yeah,
the administration needs structure and order, and academians need. They feel like Well, they do. They own the content, right? And I know how to teach, and I've been doing this a long time, and so you don't tell me what to do. and 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 somehow we have to work through that tension. And in institutions where the faculty, have some kind of a contract, labor's been organized,
Yeah.
which is not that unusual in academia.
Yeah.
Um, the contract may even preclude that, or
Yeah. It has to get negotiated in, into the process. One of our really easier installs is with nursing faculty, because nursing faculty have a whole bunch of around preventive care and things like that. So understanding that, oh, there could be some standards with the design of an online course, then that becomes a little bit an easier sell, because they're used to that. And so how do you take what they know as sort of fact and roll it over to others? Because we're not telling them how. We have no care in the world around what it is that you're actually teaching. It's really around how do you design the course. Just like when you go into a classroom and there's a fire sign exit that's illuminated, and you're like, I don't want that fire exit there. You're like, well, you don't have a choice. And it doesn't affect your level of teaching. That's somewhat of a, not a real analogy, but of what. I mean, we're not telling you how to design. We're not telling you how to deliver your instruction. We're just helping you put together the format and how you do it. That you need a desk, and the desk can you can have the desk all face the front, or you can have it in a circular environment. We're not telling you have to do it, but there are benefits for doing one over the other depending on is it a giant lecture hall, or is this a senior level where 100, 10 students are all gathered around a table. Well, the design of the classroom helps facilitate the learning the same way a design of the online course helps facilitate that learning.
right. Well, it's at some level you have to see it as as a way to get even better, a tool to level up your game rather than, I know that there's, rather than an element of control.
Yeah, should
Because
not be punitive. It should be it's here to make your life easy.
I I know from experience that there's a lot of faculty who see that as a way to control, right? I mean, you have the courses, the course shells, and the content, and people can go in those shells and look at the content, and then grade what they think their performance is, and it feels big brotherish, even though the intent might be totally legit, right? We're going to give our students a better product. Um, and that creates a natural tension too.
Yeah. It it provides for some unique discussions. And we sometimes align with the instructional designers, who are the ones who sit with the faculty and help them design some of the content, or are reviewing the content once the professor or the instructor has said, okay, I've built my course, it's ready to go. And then someone says, well, it's missing your syllabus. Where's that? Well, I have that. I'm gonna hand it out over here. Well, no, that's got to get poured into the learning management system as well. Really? Why? Because that's what it has to do. And sort of, but it's not just really why. I mean, you can explain why, so that if the student wants to find it 10 days later and they've thrown away the piece of paper you gave them that first day, then it's still there. And that is,
Right.
there's
Well,
value.
it also can be useful from a
Yeah.
faculty standpoint where, a student gets a C and they say, well, you didn't tell me that I
Yeah.
had to deliver X, Y, Z.
Here
You say,
is,
hey, look, it's right
yeah.
there. You know,
Yeah. And students want to know what they're going to be assessed against. And so, yeah, it's a, it's a nice dance that has to be done. And some people get it, and some people buy in right away, and some people are a little bit later adopters. It's the same as some people are still flip phone because that's what they want to use, but they know what they're giving up, at least if they're not gone with a Android or an iPhone. Yeah.
so you're still having fun?
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I work from home too. It's also like it's a enjoyable. We're a distributed organization, so we're based in Maryland, but I live and work out of Portland, which has been great.
No, it's really interesting because, in our business, it's virtual too. Most of it's virtual. And so there's a lot of people that I've worked with for decades I've never met in person.
Yeah.
I've only
You
seen
only
on
see
the
this part of the person and you're like, oh, you're 7 feet taller or you're not 7 feet taller. You don't know.
friend Al, we've been working on building systems together for, I don't know, 2 or 3 decades. And I finally we got on a conference call, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, dude,
I didn't even know what you look like. You different.
you haven't
Yeah.
changed a bit.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Yeah.
You're living in formaldehyde? Other than bad joke. Sorry, I'm kind of, I've got that. Well, I'm not sure I've got the market for that cornered, but perfected anyway. Um, anyway, well, thank you for being here and sharing this with us. I think we're running out of time here. It's been a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and especially given that it brings back a lot of memories for
Yeah.
me, both at Zairmail, but also of teaching and being in that environment. A lot of fun. Students are great. Education is great. But there's a lot of stuff built around it that makes it difficult to do what we need to do sometimes. But at least this stuff is something that makes it, create a better product, makes it better. Um, so before we go, wait, is there any kind of, how do we reach you if somebody has questions?
I mean, you could. I give you our website. It's www.qualitymatters.org. QUALITYMATTRES.org. We're nonprofits. We get the .org designation, and then my email address is just first initial my name J and then Snyder at qualitymatters.org. So questions, love to chat.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And is there anything you'd like us to plug for you? Is there a product, a cause, anything our listeners should know about and get engaged with?
I think this was to me. This was just a nice walk down memory lane to connect with you, Wilson. It's been. I mean, I look at you as one of my person who gave me a chance on marketing. Back when we both were a couple of years younger than we are now, and so it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. So I appreciate all that you provided me back then, and just sort of enjoyed the journey as we've gone. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I can tell right now that you had it all figured out all along.
I did. Well, I appreciate if you thought that. That's awesome. You bought my whatever I was selling at the time. But thank you. Yeah.
But here's the podcast is the direct edge. Of course, Zeromail, people have heard about Zeromail now, but maybe way too much about Zeromail. We automate mail campaigns. We're a technology company. We do that. But we also help with, help people who want to grow their business. So if you've got the people have questions about lists, about technology, about digital offerings, I mean, we're happy to help. If you look at the website, there's a great big 800 number on that and always a live person that answers it. Unlike HP, I'm not going to throw out any names, but there are providers that try not to answer their phone. We're not one of those. We love to engage, so we're happy to answer your questions. So I'd like to finish up by thanking you for joining us at Direct Edge. Remember, sustainable competitive advantage comes from building strategies that leverage your core competencies. Sounds like Quality Matters is doing just that. So identify what makes your organization and offerings unique and valuable. Embrace them as your core, both when operating and planning for the future. We'll be back with another conversation that turns strategic thinking into competitive advantage in our next episode. So until then, keep learning, innovating, and growing. And Jim, once again, thank you for being here with us.